the PS5 2 years later. So it's been almost exactly 2 years since the PS5 came out. I have had it since day one, and this is honestly, I think, the best gaming console I've ever had. The fact that it can reliably play games at 60 frames per second at over 1080p resolution is kind of all I've ever wanted from a gaming console, and just the way they've cleaned up the overall UI has been really impressive for me, jumping to this from the PlayStation 4. But you know, like anything, there are some points of criticism, so I figured today I would just go through everything I like and don't like about the PlayStation 5. Let's start out with the hardware. 2 years in, I'm still using my launch PS5, and shockingly, it's working just as well as it did on day one. The reason I say shockingly is because I've been there for the launch of every PlayStation console, and every single launch unit I've ever bought in has had some hardware issue within the first 2 years. Whether it's the Blu-ray laser breaking, the fans being too loud and overheating the console, there's a million different things that have gone wrong with both the PS3 and the PS4 over the years, and the PS4 Pro that I am happy to say, knock on wood, none of has happened to my PlayStation 5. Sony has also done 2 hardware revisions on the PlayStation 5 since it came out, and while the first one kind of didn't really improve things all that much, it actually made the console a little bit worse in the sense that it runs a lot hotter. This new revision that they've done made the console better across the board. Not only does the chip draw 20% less power to power the same games that the regular PS5 is playing, which is great, it's also much lighter, and the motherboard has been shrunken down to almost half the size of the original PS5 launch motherboard. So that basically tells us that both the PS5 Slim and Pro are on the horizon, but it's nice to see that I don't really feel like I need either of those consoles. I feel like my launch PS5, despite the fact that it's extremely large and kind of hard to fit into any TV cabinet you can throw it at, it still works just fine and feels like an extremely capable machine. And it's only going to get better thanks to accessories. I mean, we have the colored plates, which are great. We have the new camo one, which is a pattern, which is nice to see, but we also have special edition controllers coming out, like the God of War Ragnarok DualSense, which looks amazing. We also have the $200 DualSense Edge coming next year, which is a controller that people have been begging PlayStation to make for years now. Like going back to the PlayStation 4, when Xbox released their Elite controller back on the Xbox One, people were like, Sony, we want a Sony quality version of the DualShock 4 that's a more pro edition of the controller. And now here we are in 2022, and we're about to get the best controller ever made even better with the DualSense Edge. And then on the PlayStation VR side, even though it is a little bit expensive, this looks like it's going to be the best bang for your buck you can get out of a VR headset in 2022 and 2023 when the thing actually comes out. Now, of course, you still have that better competitor, which is the Oculus Quest 2. It's overall cheaper. It loses the OLED screen for sure, but it has a great resolution. And the biggest draw there is that you can actually just play the games on the headset itself. You don't need to be connected to a PlayStation or a gaming PC. But when you see the technical specifications of the PSVR 2 and compare it to its contemporaries, which are the Oculus Quest Pro, which is $1,500, and then the Valve Index, which is also over $1,000, you can kind of see why the PSVR 2 is kind of going to be the go-to for most people, because a lot of people are buying PS5s and you're looking at $550 versus over $1,000. And while the launch lineup is a little lacking in my opinion on that, you still are getting a full-on first-party Horizon game to launch with the PSVR 2. So regardless, even if you pick that thing up for one game, you have a good that one game to buy on day one. I'd love to see them bring support for games like Half-Life Alyx, Boneworks, and Bone Labs to the PSVR 2, but if this thing takes off at launch, and it seems like they think it's going to with how many of them they're making, I think it won't be long before we see developers flocking to the PSVR 2. Have you ever wanted to create your own video game? I've always wanted to make a horror game in the roguelite genre. That's right about where Southern New Hampshire University comes in, and they're sponsoring this video. SNHU is one of the largest accredited nonprofit online degree offerings in the country. They feature over 200 programs focused on getting you started or advancing in a career you love. But today we're going to talk about SNHU's game development program. In this program, you'll learn how to create realistic dynamic gameplay experiences with game AI, game physics, 2D and 3D graphics, and interface design. You'll also learn programming languages like C#, C++, and Java. And on top of that, you'll learn 3D modeling and texturing with game art software. Courses are taught by industry experts who will teach you how to research, develop, and contribute to advances in trends within the field of game programming. All of SNHU's programs are extremely flexible. Like, there are no set class times, allowing you to do your work when and wherever you want. And on top of that, if you already have college credits, you don't have to start over. They'll transfer 90 credits towards your bachelor degree and 12 credits towards your master's degree. So if you're ready to switch to a career career you'll love, just head to snhu.edu/PSReady to get started, and I also have it linked down in the description. Thanks again to SNHU for sponsoring this video. So in terms of hardware, I like where we're at. I think the idea of what's coming next year, which is allegedly going to be a slim PS5 with a detachable disk drive, that's a really cool way to bring us back to honestly the Xbox 360 days, where you could get the core Xbox 360 and plug in the memory card to keep your profile there, and that was only like $300, or you could get it with a hard drive, or you could get that Wi-Fi adapter attachment, or you could get the HD DVD attachment, which rest in peace HD DVD. I'm glad you didn't last very long, but that modular nature of the console made it easy for a kid, me, to get into console gaming on that next generation when I was in high school, right? Like I was mowing lawns every weekend and looking at the $600 PS3, I was like, I'm gonna have to wait for the price drop on that. But having the option to get that core Xbox 360 and then build it out to be a better Xbox from there, that was a really cool proposition for me. So seeing the PlayStation 5 do the same thing allegedly with a detachable disk drive that's going to keep that cheaper digital option there for us but allow us to get a disk drive later, I think that's a really cool move from Sony, and it just reminds me of getting excited for tech when I was in high school, which is kind of like something that's been lost over the past few years. I feel like tech has sort of stagnated, and seeing them do modular stuff or cool things like Samsung making a flippable screen and things like that, that's kind of what I'm looking at now as things I get excited about. So hardware wise, I'm giving the PS5 a solid A. I think Sony's really improved the cooling and the overall build quality of their console, especially if you look at the PS3 and 4. So I feel like they've done a great job there. Software wise, this is also a great year for the PlayStation 5. Look, they are running out of big features that people want that they need to include in software updates. Obviously, the biggest change we've gotten with the PS5 software this year is 1440p support. I think this is a real game changer for the console. I get that it was hard to develop the software when people were working from home, and that's why they kind of had to leave some features on the chopping block to work on later. I don't really care. I think as a consumer, someone who's paying $500 for this machine, it's fair for me to expect it to have basic features, and to me, 1440p is a basic feature. So I don't want to praise them too much for including it, but I'm glad it's finally there because I can finally take advantage of my awesome 1440p high frame rate monitor. This is kind of tied in with the hardware too, but they also released that InZone line of monitors and headsets. The headsets work great. I've tried all of them. I think they're pretty good across the board. The monitors, I would really like to see a 1440p option be available because as we're seeing, if you want to keep pushing the PS5 to play games at 4K, you're going to have to start playing the games at 30 FPS. But if you're playing the games at 60 FPS, you can generally get around 1440p. So having a monitor from Sony that can take advantage of 1440p as a resolution that also matches the look and feel of the PS5, I think that's something we're going to see in 2023. As for what I'd like to see from the software, obviously a web browser would be great. I'd love to see some competition to smart delivery because as I just talked about in my last news video, Bungie just literally had to put out an update that said, hey, if you are playing Destiny 2 on your PlayStation 5, you literally have to go to the PlayStation Store and add the free PlayStation 5 version to your account. Stop playing the 30 FPS garbage version of Destiny 2 that's on PlayStation 4. The fact that Bungie has to do that 2 years in, that's just a very blatant sign that something is not right. But as a whole, I think they've done a really good job with the software on the PS5. I mean, all the way down to stuff like giving us the option to rearrange the control center to make the button press muscle memory that we all have from the PlayStation 4 possible on the PlayStation 5. That's awesome. And they also added Apple Music support, and I'm one of the weirdos who uses Apple Music. So right now, I'm going to give it a B+ because it is lacking features that the Xbox Series X has, which are really the only reason, like I said, that console is still plugged into my TV. So once it gets the features, the small features that I think it needs, I think I'll bump it up to an A-. And what will really push it to an A is obviously full Discord support. Allegedly, that's coming in like March of 2023. I cannot wait for that to happen because all weekend when I was playing Modern Warfare 2, I had one party on PlayStation and one party on PC. And if we wanted to talk to each other, we had to use the in-game chat, but there were only 5 of us. So we were screaming at a random guy every game when we wanted to talk to our friend Trinity, which obviously not super great all around, right? Like if I had Discord on the PS5 and I could just join the chat that all my friends are already in, that would be incredible. And I'm glad that it's coming in 2023. So right now, B+, I think it has the potential to be an A by the end of next year. And then if they want to get an A+, let's get that PS3 emulation figured out, Sony. I feel like it's time for you to go 2 generations back and use this powerful new machine to play the best games ever. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 4, the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, the Resistance Resistance trilogy, the first 2 Infamous games. Like, you've got a lot of games stranded over on the PlayStation 3, and I'd love to see some support come to the PlayStation 5 for that. Now let's talk about the biggest sticking point for the PlayStation 5, which is games. I mean, you can go back last year and my PS5 1 year later where I said I think 2022 is going to be a big year for games on the PlayStation 5, and it kind of shook out, it kind of didn't. This time it looks like 2023 is going to be the big year for the PlayStation 5, but there were some highlights throughout 2022 that I think are worth bringing up. Obviously, we had the best running version of Elden Ring on the PlayStation 5. You had to download the PlayStation 4 game and run it in backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5 to get a smooth frame rate, but you didn't have any option on the Xbox Series X to get a smooth frame rate. So I'm giving the PS5 some bonus points there for being able to run Elden Ring at a smooth frame rate. Sony also released a huge exclusive right around the same time as Elden Ring, which was Horizon Forbidden West. I don't know what's going on over there where they keep releasing these open world games that are pretty good against games that are absolutely phenomenal. Horizon Zero Dawn came out a week before Breath of the Wild, which redefined the genre, and then Horizon Forbidden West came out like a week before Elden Ring, which once again redefined the genre. So that's not great optically for Horizon Forbidden West, but I have noticed that over time, as people get farther away from Elden Ring and can look at older Ubisoft style open world games, they're looking at Horizon Forbidden West and being like, this is a really good game. Obviously that checkbox style open world stuff has kind of been there, done that, thanks to Ubisoft pumping out like 5 million of these games a year, but Sony's doing it much better than Ubisoft with both Ghost of Tsushima and of course Horizon Forbidden West. You got great combat, you got great voice acting, you got great lip syncing, you got great graphics, you got a great open world. It kind of makes up for the fact that yes, the game style of an open world game is sort of tired at this point. So while Horizon Forbidden West isn't going to win any Game of the Year awards or anything like that, I think it's a very respectable offering on the PlayStation 5, and it's kind of like a really good game for people who missed the PS4 generation and want to see how far games have come. It's kind of like a good starter course on modern video games. After that, we got the biggest blunder of the year, Gran Turismo 7. I'm like the target audience. I was excited for this. They had the easiest win ever considering how many times Forza Motorsport 8 has been delayed, but no, Sony released Gran Turismo 7 as one of their first big tester live service games, and it was a mess from top to bottom. People couldn't play the game for like the first weekend, the pricing on cars was completely out of whack, and then when people complained about it, they somehow made cars more expensive. It's like a microtransaction ridden mess, and they're suffering the consequences for it. I think Gran Turismo was like the most brand cachet ever for a racing game for a really long time, and now I don't see anyone talking about Gran Turismo 7, and I really think that comes down to the fact that they bungled the launch and that they've destroyed the monetization in the game. Like, you have to grind for hours to just get one car, and I don't think people are showing up for that when they can just look at something like Forza Horizon 5 where it's throwing a car at you every 5 minutes for turning on the gas in your other car. Also, the fact that they backported it to PlayStation 4, that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. I think this game's going to get a big relaunch with like a director's cut or something like that when it comes to PC. But for now, Gran Turismo 7 is kind of like the big misstep in terms of PS exclusives. But it's not like the worst game in the world. It's not Saints Row or Gotham Knights. And then we got a game that was controversial for kind of dumb reasons, The Last of Us Part 1. Look, I get it. $70 for a game that they've released 3 times in the past 10 years is kind of a lot. But as someone who loves The Last of Us and plays it every year, playing that on the PlayStation 5 felt like the perfect way to experience that game. Not only did it look as good as The Last of Us Part 2, it actually looked better in most places, and while yes, I think they could have done a little bit more to increase the level of difficulty in the combat, the biggest addition for me, which you guys are probably going to laugh at, is the fact that you could play the game again and keep all your weapons. That was great. I loved being able to jump back into the story, but then going through it and getting to keep the assault rifle you get at the end of the game, it just makes it a completely different experience, and it kind of made it get to that point where it feels like Naughty Dog's take on the Resident Evil remakes, which is funny because Resident Evil 2 remake feels like Capcom's take on The Last of Us. So yeah, $70 for a single player game that's not including the multiplayer that came with the last $60 release. I get the argument there, but if it's really too much for you to pay, you can always wait for it to show up on PS Plus or wait for it to go down to like 30 or $40. But for me, all I want is The Last of Us Director's Cut Part 2 because I want to have a PS5 case for that game to sit next to Part 1 on my shelf. And now we're here at the end of the year and we have the first big competitor to Elden Ring, which is God of War Ragnarok, and it's got better reviews than Elden Ring, like across the board. And I think what's really going to push it into game of the year for people is not only the fact that it's coming out later in the year, obviously that helps, but also the fact that it's technically flawless at launch. Like, there's no bugs in this entire game, and you can run it at 1440p up to 4K at a locked 60 frames per second for the entire game. I mean, people have been asking for 60 FPS forever, and now we're seeing games like Gotham Knights and A Plague Tale Requiem coming out at 30, but over on God of War's side, you have one of the best looking games ever made, and it's running at a super high resolution at a fixed 60 FPS, which is all anyone wants. I also think it's cool that instead of being this like huge massive sequel, it's more of just like an improvement, a part 2 over the 2018 game. I'm glad everyone's loving it. I'm glad it's getting great review scores. I'm super excited to play it this week, but at the time of recording this video, the game isn't out, but I think that's going to be a huge game for the PlayStation 5, despite the fact it's also available on PlayStation 4. And then you got to look at third-party stuff like Modern Warfare 2. It's the biggest Call of Duty ever. It beat Black Ops 2's record of, I think Black Ops 2 reached $1 billion in 14 days, and Modern Warfare 2 was able to do it in 10. It's the best Call of Duty ever. It's the biggest game of the year. So while 2022 wasn't exactly like the biggest year for games in terms of games coming out every month, the games we had to wait for, like God of War Ragnarok or Elden Ring or hopefully the Callisto Protocol, were so big that they kind of made up for those lulls in game releases. But in 2023, it looks like we're going to get a lot more games, and I'm excited for that. So yeah, 2 years in, I cannot be more happy with the PlayStation 5. I think Sony's got a great platform here. They got a great console. It looks like even though they're going to introduce a Pro and Slim version next year, that launch version is just going to keep trucking along and be just as powerful as it's been. I'm super excited for 2023 because they're allegedly launching their PC launcher, and you'll be able to buy a game once digitally and have it on your account and download it on your PC. So overall, taking the average here, I'm going to give the PS5 2 years in a strong A, verging on A-, mainly because of the lack of games we got this year. But in terms of adding the software features people want, keeping the hardware durable, improving on it as time has gone on, introducing features and hardware people want, like the DualSense Edge, Sony has been firing on all cylinders, and while yes, they stumble a little bit from time to time, I think they're doing a good job.